Ready to go.
All right.
I am recording.
And we are live. You're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
And together, today we have another very special episode. We have the 1983 WarGames, which came out June 3rd, 1983. Nathan, did you see this in theaters?
I did not. I don't
Okay.
think I saw this in theaters. I would have been 9.
Yeah.
So I don't think.
Well, I was like, I wasn't expecting it to be like a June 3rd. It was like, oh, this was a summer movie? Okay. Actually, I probably should have looked up like whether movies came out in 1983. Was that like the weird year where it was like Raiders of the Lost Ark and a bunch of other things?
Oh yeah, it was one of those banner years. It was also a bumper crop of nuclear war films. I think The Day After came out.
Yeah.
In 1983. I think. I don't know. Let me look that up. And yeah, 1983.
Huh.
And then what was the other one? Fred's came out a year later.
Okay, this wasn't the biggest year ever, but there's still a lot of stuff in it. So
yeah,
you got like Kroll, you got like Strange Brew, Revenge of the Ninja.
Oh yeah.
Return of the Jedi.
That was a big one.
Yeah. Blue Thunder by the same director. Blue Thunder is a weird movie because it's like a mediocre movie that's weirdly ahead of its time.
Yeah, it's stupid and great all at once.
And a fantastic cast that it doesn't deserve.
Nope. A movie about a helicopter, a police super helicopter, does not deserve the cast that it had. Especially with the real simplistic plot, but the great like look of it.
Yeah.
For its time. This is the year of what I call like this is like Nathan's apocalypse journey started in this year. Because there was a lot of stuff Mom and Dad wouldn't let me watch. I didn't get to watch The Day After. I don't think I got to watch this for a while because I always had this like otherworldly obsession with nuclear war and things like that. And but once I started watching these movies, probably like 6 months after I wasn't supposed to, it set me on a path of thinking that's colored me to this day. I still like read really unusual stuff about the end of the world, but I always had my own thinking. Because this movie's very different from a lot of the other, because the other nuclear war films that came out that year, first of all, involved actual nuclear war. Spoilers. And they were just basically long PSAs about the horrors of nuclear war and why we shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And that always set me thinking. It's like, wait a minute. Even when I was like 10 and 11, I was like, there's got to be other paths here. There's no way you just weaponize like this over and over again, and if you fight this war, you lose. And then it's like anything you read that's mainstream or that's like passed through a publisher and been edited for the public, they'll tell you it's like, no, it's unwinnable scenario. It's always a bad idea. But then you find out, no, there's darker truths behind it of why the nuclear posture, and it changed every decade from the 50s to the 90s. And it's like, oh, why is this happening? Why do we have so many of these weapons? Why do the Russians have or the Soviets at the time have so many more? And it's like, oh, then you find out like, yeah, there's a kind of a sinister truth there. But it's hidden behind a lot of propaganda and high-mindedness. But we'll get into that.
Directed by John Badham, who a consummate British guy. He comes over here. Most notable probably for Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
He did like the Stakeout movie, Short Circuit. Yeah, he kind of fell off of feature films, but he's still directing TV, so he's still
He's got to be in
around.
his 80s by now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's doing like a couple, he's directing like a couple times a year and probably taking
Yeah,
home $250,000 and being like, oh, I'm good.
yeah. Pay the bills this year.
Cinematographer was William A. Fraker, who did things like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He worked with, he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He worked with Spielberg a lot. He did
Okay.
Bullet, a movie I know of, have never seen.
Oh, okay.
It's like, oh, this is like the premier like action guy movie before there were action guy movies. And then like I heard a podcast and they talked about it, and it's like he's like, no, there's like one cool scene, and then the rest of it's like boring, like 70s nonsense, or was that a 60s movie?
That would have been into the 60s.
Okay.
It's a lot more Dirty Harry if it was a procedural with a car chase in the middle of it. It's
Yeah.
kind of it's one of it's a good movie for its time. If you're expecting a movie from that era, it's like, yeah, this is kind of interesting.
68 is when that came out. So
If you're expecting the Fast and the Furious, no, it's not that.
well, yeah, it was also back in the day when editing, where things just had like a lot more space than they would nowadays, just because the editing was so, it was just a much more of a hassle. We had to you had to literally cut the film and tape it together. Whereas nowadays you can like, hey, 2 button presses, like it, because there's some like, I say this all the time, but there's some metric where they learned about like basically when you had editing, computer software editing came out, like the cuts from a film went from like, oh, like a film in the 70s would have like 200 cuts in it, and like a like MTV music video would have like 1,200 cuts in it.
Yeah, a lot less labor intensive.
Well, because also the thing with the computer stuff is like, well, I think it got there eventually, but it was like you like a lot of the like independent like movie people at the like, especially in the 70s and stuff, like when they cut the film they had no sound to listen to, so so they couldn't cut off that. They basically just had to like kind of feel like guess what was happening. Later on, I think they had the Avid. That's where you could basically, it could roll together as one, and you could like hear it and roll back the film, go back and forth, and cut with that and stuff. And then it just all became digitized and made it way easier. Because then you could throw in effects stuff too. It's like, oh, here it's fade in, fade out, which I don't know how they did that in the old days. If you really just had like, here's a piece of film stock that's like fading in and out, and you just put it over or something like that.
You held a cigarette lighter behind the film stock at a certain distance, and it would cause a blurring effect. I mean, I don't know. I'm just making that
up. Yeah, because when you're editing, you only use like 3 things. It's like a straight cut, a fade in or fade out, or a cross dissolve. That's all you need in editing. And then like you see like stuff in the 70s or with Star Wars, you had like the wipes and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, that's neat, and then no one ever uses it because it adds nothing to the film except just being distracting.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this cool thing I came up with. Or I remember like the early editing software would have all these like cool transitions where it's like, oh, that's neat, but like it adds nothing. If you're trying to tell a story, it does nothing. It's just like, look at this neat thing the computer can do.
Yeah, it's not adding anything. It's just giving credit to a software designer. Like, yeah, that was cool that he thought of that.
Or I love the ones like, I think one of the first editing softwares I got, like it was, I think it was like $80, which was a lot at the time for me. And there was like an extended thing where it's like, hey, you can buy this. So like they had these like cool transitions that of course were useless, but they had the like company logo stamped on them if you used them, and like you could pay to get the logo removed. I was like, nice. Well, I don't care, so I'm not paying you.
Yeah. That's fun.
Written by Lawrence Lasker and Walter F. Parks as a team. And then here on Internet Movie Database, I didn't find out about this. It says Wallen Green has an uncredited written by. I don't know who he is or what he did.
Well, as I understand this, the concept for this movie started knocking around in like the mid 70s.
Okay.
And then it kind of got tabled because nobody knew, because they thought it's like, well, this is a sci-fi movie. Like, and it was also supposed to be like a dark thriller more than a, almost like a teen semi-comedy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's actually a lot of like ideas and concepts that were explored in some of the original scripts, but these are the guys that made it into the fun movie that we enjoy.
Well, this writing team also like would go on to do Project X, with also Matthew Broderick, was about like, training monkeys for space. I think that's what that was about.
It was about training monkeys if they could fly planes through a nuclear battlefield. How they reacted to slow radiation poisoning. It was a real upbeat show.
And Sneakers, which of course is a very tech savvy movie as well. So
yeah.
Cast: Matthew Broderick, Dabney Coleman, who is basically like, he's basically this and Cloak and Daggers, the ones I know him from, but he's like all over the place. It's like, oh, that guy.
Yeah. This whole movie is like, oh, that guy.
Yeah. John Wood is just a British guy. We got Ali Sheedy before The Breakfast Club, just a year before. Barry Corbin, who's another like, he always just plays a gruff guy.
Yep.
Wasn't he like
played the same role his whole career? Yeah.
Wasn't he like Tommy Lee Jones' dad in No Country for Old Men or something?
Yes, he was. Yeah. He was sitting around the house. His dad was talking to him, or no, it was his uncle. I think it was his uncle.
Huh. Okay.
But yeah, he was blind in one eye.
Yeah.
He's like, I could see if I get you another TV. It helps pass the times. Like, I don't like anything I hear on it. It's like these two people are just completely miserable guys. That whole movie's brilliant. But yeah, he was that guy.
Eddie Deason, who was probably like the preeminent nerd of like the late 70s and 80s. He's definitely one of those, like, that guy. He has a wide range of roles, like, because like he does it so well. You feel like, oh, does he have like autism or something like that? But I've seen him in so many different roles. It's like, no, he just has a weird voice. Really, he's an actor. Yeah. I mean, he's never really a leading man, but I've seen him be like a villain, which is weird.
Yeah, he has that strange way of delivering dialogue.
And then,
hey, what's that? Like, he talks like that. It's not affected. Like, that's just how the flow of his talking is. What have you got there? It's like, who really talks like that?
I've known people like that, but yeah. I mean, that's why I go to autism, because it's like somebody who doesn't like recognize the volume of their voice, or like what other people feel, what other people's feelings are and stuff like that, and they can't read like faces. But here it's just a weird character. So
yeah, it's a proto nerd.
And then I'll have several more people pop up as we go through this. There's a bunch of people in this movie. Although the one I couldn't find, because I watched it on Amazon, so like when you hover over the screen, it'll say who's in the scene, and William H. Macy kept popping up, but I'd never found him. But apparently he has like an uncredited role as just like one of the guys behind a computer in the war room.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, he looks like he could be. William H. Macy's one of those guys that's like, he could be like a degenerate alcoholic father or an Air Force officer. Like, just change his hairstyle.
So we have Act 1. Well, I guess my history with it is that this was just a movie on cable all the time.
Yeah, all the time. As a matter of fact, I really didn't need to watch this because I just remembered. It's like, yeah, I've seen this like 400 times.
So we have an SUV pulls up to a house, and there's like a sandstorm. A couple of guys, Michael Madsen and John Spencer. Michael Madsen probably most known from like Reservoir Dogs or just Quentin Tarantino movies. And then John Spencer from The West Wing, where he's just a guy with a gruff voice. I mean, he's a good actor, but that's what
Yeah,
we know him
you've
from.
seen him. Yeah, the 15-year-old Michael Madsen and that guy, and they're talking about weed the whole time they're going down the elevator.
Oh, okay. They show their
You remember John's? I'll reference books as we go through this, but remember Command and Control, that book about the Titan missile silo in Damascus and Arkansas and the other nuclear accidents that we had.
I know, but I haven't read that book yet. I haven't.
Oh,
It's in my queue, but I haven't read it.
Great book. You should read it. But yeah, it basically talks about how in the 70s and 80s, like they had to start implementing a lot of drug testing and stuff, especially on people that were on like silo duty, because there's actually a gag game made called Silo Command, where it's like it talks about all these historical things that were going on, and it was published in the 90s, but it's like, and you're in charge of a missile silo, and it's just a simulation of you sitting there for hours and nothing ever happens because you have one job to do and that's it. So yeah, they had a real problem with people just being blasted out of their minds on drugs like LSD, things like that, because they were just so bored. So yeah, it was funny that like the whole running dialogue as they're going down the elevators, they're talking about like sensimilla and different kinds of marijuana. So yeah.
I say they show their badges to a mirror, and you're like, "What's going on here?" I mean, we know, but you have to pretend like this is the first time you're seeing it, and it's revealed to be an Air Force installation. Here, I wrote down they have Art LaFour as a guard, who's definitely just another one of those like, oh, that guy. He plays like a father and everything. He's been in 170 things, so yeah, he's a character actor. They grab their guns and go in an elevator. They relieve some other guys, and they get locked in the vault. Apparently, they're late to relieve those guys, but it's noted in the record. So they're manning a missile silo. I don't know if this is Casey Kasem, but it definitely sounds like Casey Kasem gives an alert.
It would be cool if it was. I mean,
well, yeah, because this voiceover, it does sound like Casey Kasem. It's like, now read your red cards for the top 40. We're going to release it. So yeah, there's an alert that comes in. They authenticate the message. I basically realized now. Well, I don't know. Does all this stuff with like the break over the red cards and you break it open? Is all that stuff like real or something?
I don't. Well, they don't know.
Okay.
Because Stanley Kubrick gotten so much shit for Doctor Strangelove that they were very unfriendly to Hollywood for years afterwards because he like figured things out just like. Because you remember you were telling me like they came to him was like, well, how'd you get the cockpit for the Strato Fortress? It's like, oh, you put it in Life magazine. What about all this secret stuff about reaching fail safe points and all that? And it's like, oh, we just made that up. So it's close enough that they got So I have no idea.
Well, I just like the thing that like triggered in me is like I remember this exact same scene from Crimson Tide. And it's like, oh, Crimson Tide just pulled this from WarGames because why we don't know any better, so just do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they're never going to tell you. The most expensive set built in Hollywood at this time was the one built for this movie for NORAD because they wouldn't show them the control room, obviously, when they took them on a tour. So they just had to extrapolate. It's like, how much are we paying in defense money every year? Well, it must look like this. And the people at NORAD were like, shit, I wish. Even the one they have now, when they could actually conceivably do that, is just a real scaled down version of this.
Yeah.
Back then, you couldn't project. You wouldn't have TVs that projected because it would just be a you have a 5-hour lifespan on the light bulbs. And it's time to get the guys in there to change the bulbs. It's not. So yeah,
and the guys never come to change the bulbs because that's money.
Yeah.
So they both turn their keys to set the missiles. So it's like they're two consoles set apart, so one guy can't just launch a missile by himself, presumably.
Yeah. The Air Force will tell you that's true. Well, yeah, of course, all the safety stuff is like, yeah, that's absolutely right, but you don't know,
yeah.
and they're not going to tell you. So
The captain who's played by the John Spencer, he's like hesitant to launch the missiles because he's like, wait, are we really gonna do this? And he's like trying to get people on the phone. It's like, I'm not gonna just kill 70 million people because this thing says there might be a problem. Like I want to get people on the blower. And so Michael Madsen pulls a gun on the captain and says, "Turn your key, sir." Which I remember that being used in pop culture and stuff like that. And I forgot that this was from that movie. And that's Michael Madsen saying it.
Yeah, it's cool on two levels. Cool in multiple dimensions.
Then we cut to credits, and the credits are like typed out over footage of like military operations around NORAD. Or just, like a helicopter
lots of
flying.
strident music.
Yeah.
Where they're always playing the drums.
Yeah. There's some lady like leading some feds into NORAD. I think they're like, I don't know, like Senate like assistants or something like that, or no?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
someone who approves money.
Yeah,
you got to suck the money, guys.
Yeah. They're not senators, but there's somebody that like talks to senators.
Yeah.
And then we cut
too busy fundraising.
Yeah. We cut to the war room with the giant screens and all the walls, and there's the bank of computers. This is like the most famous war room ever built. I mean, before that it would have been Dr. Strangelove, which was that the one? Well, I think both of them, like, Reagan was like, "Hey, where's the war room?" And they're like, "Sir, that's a movie."
Well, especially Ronald Reagan, if you showed him anything on film, he was like, "Oh, that must be real, right?" It's like, no, and you worked in movies, you should know this, but
it's not. Yeah, it's nice
president we ever had.
A man in his 60s or 70s or whatever, just being like, who only knows anything from movies and television.
Yeah, pop culture references and belief in the fundamental goodness of the American people. So, all right, yeah, it's a nice world you live in. And it is constructed around dementia, but continue. Here's the launch codes, by the way. Let's fire them up.
Or I mean, like there was a cool board in Failsafe too, but Failsafe gets like unceremoniously compared because it came out the same year to Doctor Strangelove, which is just a better movie, but not necessarily. I mean, like Failsafe's a good like thriller, and Doctor Strangelove is just such a unique movie.
Oh yeah.
Like it's technically a comedy, but it does so many things.
Probably the most influential movie about nuclear war ever made. And really, it's just a bunch of people acting strangely, but there's a reason. It's like, yeah, you'd have to be nuts to think that, like, oh yeah, no, this is viable.
Maybe is what I'm getting at. Like this is the war room. Like this.
Yes.
Everyone was always trying to create this war room, and nobody ever does it better. I mean, I could see it like somebody.
Well, like I said, it was $1 million in 80s bucks to build this thing. It was the most expensive single set ever built for a movie to that time, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, well, I also remember there's like essentially no action scenes in this entire movie.
Nothing going on, just stuff moving around a monitor, and a great soundtrack. Weirdly, an 80s movie with no pop music in it, just a soundtrack.
Yeah.
Usually an 80s movie always would have some, Oingo Boingo or something like. No, it's just all just music composed for the film.
And there's even stuff like, when someone would create something like this is the NASA Center, they'd create something that looked like a modern version of the WarGames set, and like just always been that way. And like even NASA's like kind of gone around and like tried to do its version of it, where it's like, well, it doesn't look like the movie, but at least they have some big screens and everybody has a computer in front of them. So and like businesses try to do that too. Where now it's not that hard. Where it's like you just throw a couple of projectors in the ceiling, and then just everybody has a laptop. It's like there's your war game set, but But this just has a whole character unto itself, and
Yeah.
everybody stole from it. So
Yeah, it was a great idea. I mean, a lot of the visual, and even though the technical stuff in this movie is kind of, it seems ridiculous to us, it's still effective. I mean, it's
yeah.
still like it puts you in that time and place. Because that, like, I would have been a little kid when that kind of stuff was going on, but that stuff was still going on, some form of it, when I was a teenager. Like, the weird, like, oh, let's dial 1,000 phone numbers, and so I knew people that did that. Like, that was real. Only then you did it from, like, you didn't do it from your house, you did it from, like, trunk lines and access points. Yeah, I knew weird people like that. Have no technical acumen at all, but I knew people who did.
Yeah.
And it was like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Oh, I just want to fuck with the FBI. It's like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Sounds like an idea with a lot of negatives. It's like, I'm just going to get one over on them. It's like thousands of dollars of homemade equipment that you got schematics from the back of a magazine that was published on a Xerox printer. Like, those were the people I somewhat knew that were doing stuff like that. And they're all rich now and, like, live in nice places, so they were smart. But yeah.
So yeah, the lady, it's Pat Healy is her name, just because I got that from watching it on Amazon. Told me that. She tells McKittrick, played by Dabney Coleman, that's like some Senate aides are here to talk about the missile test from the beginning of the movie. They introduce Barry Corbin as General Behringer. McKittrick wants to take men out of the missile command loop and wants to set up a computer automated response. Well, it's not like an automated response. It's like the computer's like, all right, we're good to go. So now a different person gets to press the button.
Well, it's like you said, the computer won't hesitate. It will just respond accordingly. So essentially, they're talking about rolling it back to launch on warning, which is something we did away with in the 70s. Because remember, we did that one podcast where I played the emergency message, like, because someone left a simulation going in a computer in the 70s, and these were the old, like, reel-to-reel computers. And they left the war simulation in there and turned on the actual computer, and it started saying, oh, send out messages that a nuclear strike's incoming. And yeah, we were launch on warning then, and we got away from it because it's like, oh, we could really screw up and just accidentally start a war.
McKittrick shows the group the War Operation Plan Response, which is the Whopper computer.
Yep.
It rooms of banks of computers, but they always cut to the Whopper. It's just kind of like a Star Trek. It kind of looks like a Star Trek torpedo, but with like extra lights on it.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie in a lot of ways is just kind of Star Trek, where it's like everybody staring at a screen.
Yeah, it's this. I always put this movie in the category of science fiction.
Yeah.
Because it imagined some things that weren't real around things that were real. But we didn't have, like, self-aware computers that spoke to you. We don't have those now. We didn't have definitely have H3. So
so yeah, the Whopper just like runs simulations all day to see, like, if there's a winnable scenario. Although that's kind of weird because, like, at the end it's like all right, I guess there is no winnable scenario. It's like, wait, why this sudden conclusion come right now? But I guess that's because that's where the movie ends. So,
well, it had to interact with humanity.
Yeah, that's true.
Always the human factor, remember.
Behringer is skeptical of the Whopper, and so he leaves because, like, right now he's in hot shit because, like, his guys failed because they didn't launch a missile on
blindly start World War III, which is actually the job. So it's weird.
I forget. Yeah, they said the percentage. What was it with, like, I can't remember. Was it a high percentage that didn't turn the keys? Was it like 60 or was it like 20 and they couldn't accept it? 20%.
That was like 30. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Okay.
Anything over 25% could screw up their whatever average they were playing on.
Okay.
But by the quick fact, folks, or not fact, like I said, everything I say about this could be bullshit because geniuses study this stuff and it still doesn't make a lot of sense. But things I've read, by the time you're launching silo-based missiles from America, the war is essentially over. Because what you're attempting to do by launching silo-based missiles is avoid what's called counterforce. which means they're just going to rain missiles down on your silos. So you want those to be empty, which means you're hopped up to the next phase, which is called counter value, which is where you're trading New York for Moscow, which that's the end of the world when you start dropping, especially multi-megaton devices on large cities.
Remember, silos are just for revenge.
Yeah. Oh, silos are just targets. They always talk about the nuclear triad, but really the thing that matters is the submarines. They're the only thing that matters. That's why the Russians, and they're the most expensive thing to get right. That's why the Soviets and the Russians to this day don't have many. They have some. They don't have the shit like we do. But and we do not negotiate treaty on Trident at all. There's no like limitations. I think there's limitations in amount. It's only enough to destroy the Soviet Union 4 times instead of 10. But you can negotiate away all our silo-based missiles, all our airdrops. We're ready to talk about that. But when it comes to Trident, it's like a black hole. It's like, where are the Americans? They didn't show up. It's like, because they're not going to negotiate on that, because it was the hardest thing to get right.
I loved it. It was a neat idea, and they do it. So they have it visually representing it occasionally in For All Mankind, where they came up with the Leviathan system, where they basically launched Saturn V rockets out of the ocean.
Yeah. It's a real thing, by the way. They could do that. It's the green people would get really upset about it, though, when you realize what rocket fuel is made out of. But you don't have to build an infrastructure around launching them if you do it that way, because the water supports its weight until it breaches the surface. The Russians actually have done that to launch a few satellites on a much smaller scale than Saturn or in-1 rockets. But it absolutely decimates the sea because it's mostly acid. It's just lit on fire. It's and when it mixes with briny seawater, it's even more corrosive and nasty. And the shrimp don't like it. They tend to disintegrate.
So we have our plot point is basically they're switching over human response to computer response. I have that being the end of Act 1.
Yep.
So we have Act 2. We're in Seattle with David, Matthew Broderick, who's playing Galaga. So showing off the arcade craze at the time.
Yep.
Actually, I don't know when that started, but it's more of a 70s thing. But
no, it was still around that. I was terrible at all those games. Didn't get my name on the board unless it was brand new.
Well, I forget when the Crash is, but I think it's like early 80s. But that was an Atari thing. But I don't know.
Well, there was a Crash because there was like a change of technology. Because they went from like the single flat plane to like dimensional grid stuff where it had the appearance of depth. Those were popular for a while, and then they went to the like, let's have like actual film and you play the game, and then that was over after that. Then the home console started taking over.
Well, I mean, the Crash was really like after Atari. Like Atari made a new Atari, and then all the people that had the old Atari were like. Does that play the old Atari games? Or like, no. And then Atari like just crashed and everything. But like, I mean, everything like PC games and stuff like that stuff kept going on. But like the consoles, like Commodore 64 and stuff like that was just like dead for a moment. And then Nintendo came in and it was all back, and then it's never stopped. So
yeah, I had ColecoVision when I was a kid. I played Mr. Do constantly.
So he's late for something. He runs off and he finds out he's like sneaking into his biology class, which that's, I don't know, maybe this is just a California thing, but like he runs away. He leaves the Galaga machine, but like with a kid. It's like, hey, here, keep playing it. And then he runs back to school and we're like, wait, why is that kid also not in school? Like, what the hell's going on here? Is some California thing where it's like, this is my free period or whatever.
Yeah, also, like everyone should be in school. Yeah.
Well, also like in California, they have weird shit where like their lockers are outside, where it's like that. From the Midwest, that makes no sense. But there, it's not going to.
Yeah, you see that, and you're like, they must hate these kids. Getting your books, and you get frostbite, and you have to cut off the tips of their fingers. Yeah, never. Well, this is actually in Seattle, so they have winter in Seattle, don't they?
Yeah.
Do they? Okay, yeah. They have winter in Northern California, so
yeah. I guess I should say a West Coast thing. Well, I mean, it's just like depictions of school in movies. It's usually on like that's always like a. I mean, it's always usually shot in California. I mean, this is probably shot in Seattle, but like there is like a thing that's like that's weird. That doesn't seem like the school I went to.
Yeah, I went to like a gulag. Where's this nice place? It's like, oh, they have a tax base there. That's right. Yeah, they didn't close down all the coal mines and mills and be like, good luck.
Well, also because it's Hollywood, it could not even be a school too. So
Yeah, it could be an insane asylum.
um, he sneaks in the biology class, but the teacher points it out that he's getting in late, and he also shows everyone they got an F on the test. They introduce Jennifer, played by Ali Sheedy, who
Both those actors now, by the way, 60. Just put that in your store. That it's like,
Yeah,
wow. To me, that seems weird, but yeah,
I mean,
makes
so
sense.
Tom Cruise is 60, so
Yeah.
it's that same era. So, and the teacher says, "Who introduced the idea of procreation without sex?" And then the teacher's trying to goad them on to say like, "No, what were you talking about?" Because she laughs because David says something to her, and then he says out loud and goes, your wife." And so the class gets a big laugh out of that, and he just sends him to the principal's office. So he's going to the principal's office, and the one secretary lady's like, "Oh, you again?" He's like, "Yep." And before he goes in to talk to the principal, he goes into their computer and like pulls out like a well, it wasn't a keyboard tray. It was some sort of I don't even know what it'd be at the time.
Writing tray.
Yeah, like a writing tray, and so it has like notes on it for the passwords on the computer. So it's like, oh, okay, well, he's just stealing some passwords. That's just a general hack. So
Yeah.
you can still do that today.
Yeah, that still works, by the way.
Yeah, which is why whenever I like have to come up with a password, it's like I never write down any of my passwords. So I'm just like, have to put it in there and like, oh shit, what's the weird thing I came up with? But they make it easier to just make a new password. So
Yeah.
So
thing about that scene where he says that about his wife.
yeah,
They didn't reveal the punchline the only people that knew it were the teacher and Matthew Broderick. They didn't reveal the punchline because they wanted a genuine reaction.
yeah.
And the crew was laughing out loud close to the mics. So if you pay attention to that scene, because they just went with it, they're like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
You can hear like there's definitely older men and more people laughing in the 8 people that had in that scene, because they wanted a genuine reaction from the people playing the students. Because Ali Sheedy didn't know it either, because he said something random to her before, and then they ADR'd and he's like what he whispered to her, so it seemed like it was the right thing. But yeah, she had no idea. So it was a completely genuine reaction from everyone except the director and those two actors. That's why you can hear people off mic like, teenager with 3 balls or something. Voice.
Jennifer rides up on like a motorbike, or is that just a moped? I don't know what the hell that thing is.
Moped thing.
Okay.
They had a lot of weird crap like that back then. You could pedal it if it failed, or you could pedal it to start the engine. But it was a way, it's like sell it as a pedal bike to get around rules. But if you tried to pedal that thing, it weighed like 100 pounds. Like, yeah, good luck.
So she gives him a ride home, and he says he's not going to summer school. And then he like leads her on as to like how he's going to like pass the class.
Yeah.
And so they get to his house, but Jennifer's concerned, like, hey, why aren't your parents home? And he's like, oh, they both work.
Yeah.
Because she's kind of like scared, like, oh no, I'm going up to this boy's room, like what could happen? And he's like, I'm gonna go cheat at school with my hacking abilities. So that's all he's really concerned about. So he's not even like thinking on the same wavelength.
No.
So he's got like a ton of computer stuff. But I see, like his parents both work, so they're probably loaded. So that's why he's got all this stuff. But
yeah.
Also they're in Seattle, so his dad could probably be like a part of like Microsoft at this time, maybe.
Yeah, his mom's like a Century 21 real estate lady.
Yeah.
Dad seems like a guy who's like an engineer or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, living at that era and that time and that place. It's like, oh, they probably, yeah, you want a, a couple $1,000 worth of computer stuff then was more expensive. The computer setup he has now, he had then probably cost more than mine and your computer put together.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in today's money, like
Yeah.
it's that stuff was crazy back then.
Oh, there's a similar thing in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because I think I forget what it's about. But he says like, I wanted a car that gave me a computer. Meanwhile, he has like this is like $18,000 synthesizer in his room.
Yeah, stock. It's like, wait a minute, bought you a Moog synthesizer when that was like a new thing. They were building them by hand in Berkeley, California. Like, Mom and Dad hate me. It's like, no, I think they really love you because that's worth much more now than it was then.
So so he puts like, he puts the phone on the cradle. So connecting to the internet. I can't remember what it was called at this time, but
some form of ARPANET, something like that.
Yeah. Because like this is even before BBS, right? The broadcast bulletin system or something like that.
Probably before it was generally available to the public. I'm guessing. I'm not an expert. But
I never used BBS. I'm just very vaguely aware of it.
I did. I knew what it was and read things off it all the time.
All right. I guess it stands for bulletin board system. That's all it stands for. Real simple stuff. So to like
ASCII bulletin board type, read only.
Yeah.
No text digital only. Files, no pictures.
Yeah, well, you got your ASCII art.
you got ASCII art, yeah.
And children, if you know what that is, it's taking the characters of the screen and making images with the characters on the keyboard.
Yeah, this was emojis before they were emojis.
Yeah.
These are primordial emojis.
But to like so here having it being like a computer to computer thing, the computer's hooked up to a phone. You can call another computer and then like get into that computer. So he knows the computer phone number, and so he calls up the school computer, and then he puts on this little cradle, and then the computers can then talk to each other. Which again, if you'd ever used dial-up internet, that's essentially what that was. So,
yep.
Or a phone line was dedicated to your internet, which is how I got into a weird sleeping style in high school, because I didn't want to use the internet when everybody else needed a phone. So I would like get home from school, go to bed, wake up at like 4 a.m, and then use the internet and get all my homework done. So it's great for that. Straight A's.
Yeah. Ready to go.
So he calls up the school computer. He uses the password he got from the desk, and then he changes his grade from an F to a C. He changes Jennifer's grade too, but she gets mad because like she's afraid that like cheating the system will basically come back to haunt her somehow. So
yeah.
So then he changes her grade back to an F, and then when she leaves, he changes it to an A, which I'm immediately like, well, you can't go from an F to an A. That's just going to be immediately suspicious.
Yeah, the teachers are going to check that. It's not like, oh, it's in the computer. It's forever. But it just establishes things about the character, that he's kind of a rogue, and she's sort of like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, no one will know. And it's like, well, you're wrong, but yeah.
Well, it's also the idea is that like he's on the cutting edge, and like there probably would be holes and cracks where like people aren't paying attention to the computer stuff, and he could just, lie your way through things and get away with it.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a roguish character, kind of an innocent, who's like, well, I'm doing this because I can. It's like, why wouldn't you do this if you could? And there's like no greater dimension to his thinking, which is a problem with David the whole movie. Like, he never gets resolved. Like, did you know you ultimately did the wrong thing and almost started World War III? Like, we never have that conversation. It's just kind of like roll credits. Like, okay, yeah,
I mean, he does like accept the gravity of the situation, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
After the fact,
yeah. I don't know, it's also like he has like a lot of like weird skills and everything. It's like, oh, like these could be useful in a job, and it's like this is why he's doing bad in school because it doesn't matter to him because he's already like on a path to success if he doesn't go to jail.
yeah, this guy's gonna start like, yeah, Pornhub or whatever, you know.
um. So then we see we see the missile command jockeys like the Michael Madsen and John what was his name?
Yeah, you said it, John. Yeah, The West Wing.
Yeah. I guess I'm gonna go look at John Spencer.
Spencer. Yeah.
Now I gotta go back to my other notes. Now this is gonna be even more complicated. um Okay, yes, yeah. So Michael Madsen didn't shoot John Spencer, so he's still alive. So they're there gathering up all their stuff, and then they see them put in like this kind of like random number generator with red lights, and they install it, and that's replacing them.
Yeah.
I even like they take out the seat, but all the consoles are still there. No one's resting here. um. Oh, then we see the family's eating. I like that dad has like a this. Yeah, this is like where you could probably tell he's like always probably an engineer because he has this hack for buttering corn cob where he butters a piece of bread and then puts the corn on the bread and just rolls it. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess that's a good idea. Although I really don't care. I'm not eating corn cob that much. So.
Yeah.
Oh, shows him to like thinks outside the box. And then, but then the fun thing is that like the corn's raw because the mom's like on some new diet thing. It's like, oh, you get more nutrients this way. And he's like, and the dad's like, just cook it and we'll eat some or we'll take some vitamins.
Yeah. Yeah, just raw off the stock corn. Like, yeah, his teeth would come out. It'd be like hard as granite. Well, I guess it was still moist, but it still tastes terrible.
Have you ever had it? Is there any vegetable you ever had where it's like not really meant to be served raw, but you've had it that way?
I can't think of any.
Yeah, me either.
Usually, like raw vegetable, like raw root vegetables, like carrots and stuff, which are really the only. I like carrots and peppers. Those are the only vegetables I really like. I will always eat those. Just cut them up and eat. I don't see the point in cooking them because they just turn into mush. Or you're like, let's put honey and sugar on it. It's like, well, let's eat a candy bar then. What
Oh, there's I've seen the people that
potatoes are awful.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh, this is not fit for human consumption. I have had raw potatoes. There's nothing to them. I mean, there's not much to them anyway. They're just kind of filled in.
Yeah, I mean, really, all you do with potatoes is you break them up, and so you can put the butter and salt inside.
Yeah, potatoes are just bread if you grew it in the ground. There's no nutritional value to them at all. But they were a way to keep from starving to death.
Yeah,
so. Potatoes are like the white man's rice. It's like there's just nothing to it, but it's like, well, you won't starve. You won't feel like you're starving to death.
Yeah, they're calorically dense but nutriently like kind of poor.
Yeah, you can actually get like rickets or something just eating potatoes, just like you can with rice. It's like it doesn't do anything. It's just a fun ad food. If you got to chop wood, it's fine. That's why when you see like the early Irish immigrants, it's like, man, I wish I had their metabolism. Look at me. It's like, I am 200 years later. I'm as big as a truck. And you realize, oh, they were just starving to death eating potatoes. And then got a blight. And it's like, oh, we can't eat grass. So we better run to America, this dark, infinite wilderness, and see what kills us there. But yeah, that's why they're all like look like 12-year-olds, and they were like 45. It's like, well, yeah, because they just empty calories was their staple.
No, the thing I was gonna say, like I've never done it because I hate onions, but there are people that'll eat onions like they're eating an apple.
Oh yeah, I've done that. It's not. It's an assault on your sinuses. It's like not. It's like you ever had that? You ever had minced garlic where you're just like, I'm just gonna eat some of this
Yeah.
because I love the garlic flavor, and it's like, what does this taste like from the source? And it's just such an assault on your sinuses and your taste buds. It's like this is too much. This needs to be cooked into something. It's like eating a peppercorn or something. It's like, oh god.
Let's see where are we. So at the dinner table, David sees an advertisement in a magazine for some video game company called Protovision.
Protovision.
Then he goes off to his room, and he calls some people up to get like phone info about Protovision. And he also like, hey, what's the local area codes? And so he sets up his computer to basically call every number in the area, including like so he can maybe get into the Protovision computer and see what games they have before they get released.
Yeah. Which at that time it's like, well, you better be into phone hacking too, because it's going to be like a $20,000 phone bill. But we assume he is. I don't know if that was addressed. I forgot.
Also, it's a thing if if you're young, you don't know about. But phone bills used to be like things that like children were beat over.
Oh
yeah. A long distance.
This way, your average gas and electric bill in 2020 nowadays like $250 to $300 unless you're like weirdly efficient or you have good insulation or something. Your average like gas and electric bill back then was like $25, but you get a phone bill for $300, no problem. I mean, just yeah, and that exceeded most people's car payments, came close to their mortgage payment. So kids, that's like getting $1,000 bill in the mail.
And long distance phone calls, like don't even talk about it. No long distance phone calls.
Got an egg timer. Take 5 minutes to say Merry Christmas to Grandma.
And nowadays, like that doesn't even matter. Everybody has unlimited minutes and all that stuff. So it's like,
well, that's good. That's why they shattered that monopoly, not just once, but like 3 times. Like, this is stupid. Some of this phone stuff's been in service since the 50s. Like we're still using like mechanical switchboards. I think that died off in the 90s.
Yeah. And then for a moment there, we had all the to save you money. There was so many like 1-800-collect like things where you could call people, collect calls where you call somebody and the person picking up would have to pay for the call. But that's also where you had phone booths and stuff like that. It cost a quarter to call somebody. So.
Yep. Or you could use a micro cassette recorder and play weird tones into them and call home.
Or what he does in this movie, he uses a pull tab to like short circuit the phone.
Make out of payment. Yeah. How many got in serious trouble trying to replicate that, or electrocuted, or the phone company had to go around and epoxy or just made a molded one piece thing. So
I bet there's something you could switch to. Like, I mean, some of the stuff in this movie is probably outdated by the time the movie came out, but it's still like, not all the technology's changed over, so all this stuff could work somewhere in America at the time this came out. Because they're using analog stuff here. Like nowadays, like you could, because he literally just like he records the beeps on the keypad and just plays it back, and the thing's like, yep, it sounds like what I want to hear. So it's like not digital.
Yeah, but I know for a fact you could play tones into phones and make them do weird stuff.
Oh yeah, that's the whole freaking culture where there was a guy named Captain Crunch because there was a whistle that Captain Crunch, the cereal, had in its bag, and he figured out like if you played this tone into a phone, it would basically like oh, you've paid your money, and so you can make free calls with it. And there's like stuff like you're talking about with the guys you knew, where you had lineman phones where you could just like hike up a phone line and tap in and call people.
Yep. But the thing is, anyway, I mean, number one, the phone company would detect that at some point and whoever you're calling, like, guess whose house they're going to? Like, well, they know that number it was called because they were like, hey, you want to call your parents? And I was like, no, not calling my home number. The phone cops will show up at mom and dad's house. That's a WKRP in Cincinnati reference, if anyone ever Dr. Johnny Fever. It's like, the phone cops are coming
out. Jennifer hangs out with David again. She's kind of like more like happy to be around him. She's not angry anymore. And then she's like, hey, can you change my grade? And he's like, yeah, I already did that. It's like, what'd you give me? He's like a D. And she's like mad for a minute. He's like, I gave you an A. And she's like, oh, good. I'm just like, you're not going to go with. You're not getting an A in biology.
This is the first movie I can remember where somebody, now this came up in other movies later. Maybe it was in this before or in movies before, where the main character had the passive girlfriend that you kind of liked.
Yeah.
It's like they were not like just romantically like, oh, give me a kiss, you know. She was the passive girlfriend that.
Well, I mean, yeah, they're still like, you know, kids essentially, so they're kind of just like hanging out,
right?
But, you know, they're teenagers, so, you know, eventually, you know.
But in movies prior to this, there always had to be like a sexual element, or like, I love you and I won't stop, and they're dragging him away. No, not in this movie. It's more. This is the passive girlfriend.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the only romance comes about when they're like, we're all going to die. So
go out on the beach and hump because it's almost over, you know. Of course, they don't do that because she's like, let's swim to shore and stop this. Swim. It's like, are you a cock? No, she didn't say
that. They review the computer hits he's got so far because he's calling every computer in this area. He found a bank. He's like, I should save that. Although it's weird here that, I mean, like, I'm sure there could be stuff that was true, but they make it sound here like basically like if you call a computer, you can just like wreak havoc on their system because only one system actually has like a password. Well, I mean, I guess the school has a password, but
yeah.
Because they're able to like mess around with the Pan Am computer by like setting up a flight and a reservation. But he's like, oh, so we have tickets now? I was like, no, I just set up a reservation. So it's not like money exchanged hands or anything like that. Or they didn't steal money from Pan Am, but they would go bankrupt anyway. So,
yeah. As it turns out.
I can't remember why, because it's like it's still, even still to this day, it's still like a thing that people remember, think it's like it was cool at the time. And there was like a Pan Am TV show that came out with like a couple of years ago that of course didn't last long, but or even in like 2001 A Space Odyssey, you know, they had Pan Am spaceships and stuff like that. So
yeah, that industry is very weird because I know a lot of people that live around me or that used to, they worked in that industry, and it seemed like, oh, it's just you go bankrupt every 5 years. That's your business model. It's like every time fuel prices go up, we go bankrupt and reorganize, and you know everyone loses their pension, but somehow the CEO gets a $20 million bonus. Well, okay, this is probably indicative of other problems.
Oh yeah, there's also a thing where it's like every time there's like, hey, what's the best airline? It's always an airline that's like on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah,
because I remember like the Virgin, I think it was like Virgin Atlantic or something like that. They had, or Virgin Airlines. Like I remember people like spouting like all the cool stuff they did, and then they sold the company with like within 5 years, and then you got like, you know, like Southwest or whatever weird like Florida company like Pacific Blue or some shit like that or whatever it's called. I can't remember.
Sky Blue.
Where it's like everyone's like, these are absolutely the most shit companies in the world. It's just like, but they never fail for some reason, but everybody hates using them.
It's yeah, because it is like, the thing with those, it's like Allegiant, and we're gonna get sued naming these airlines. Anyway, everyone hates them. It is like kind of going back into the 60s in a way, because that's when those fucking planes were built. I mean, they're using stuff that's like, you know, I'm surprised I don't see like a tri-motor like McDonnell Douglas, you know, the ones with the 3 engines on the back.
Yeah.
And they don't have those anymore. 727s, they don't have those anymore. But it's like, some of these carriers are like, oh, this was a FedEx plane, and we just like ripped the carpet out and put seats in it. Have fun, you know. Plane's got a It's the one that Tom Hanks crashed in. We just put it back together. It's, yeah.
Or I love the like I don't know, maybe this was an Onion article, but they saw some designs for like to get even more people in airplane. It was like seating that was basically just like slightly leaning, like it wasn't a seat, a complete seat. You were just kind of like
sitting like off to the side for the whole.
Yeah.
Well, the Japanese used to like, let's pressurize the cargo hulls and we'll just fly from the north to the south of Japan. We can get 500 people in like a 747 or something, and they just like, yeah, let's just put seats in the bottom, pressurize it, and that was fine for what till one of those planes crashed. It's like, oh, one crash into a mountain, it's the worst airline disaster in history. It's like, why? It's like 580 people died. It's 4 plane crashes here. It's they get it all at once. But yeah.
So David finds a computer that doesn't identify himself, and so he's like enthralled with this. He gets his computer. He gets the computer he's talking to to print out a list of games. It's benign at first. It's like chess, backgammon, and then it starts saying stuff like, like chemical warfare,
biotoxic warfare,
and then it ends with global thermonuclear war.
Yeah, let's play that.
Yeah, that sounds like a cool game. So they head over to like some computer nerds to try to figure out like what's going on with this computer they found. They find Jim, who's a little frazzled, and then Eddie Deason shows up as Malvin. And we just look at that, it's like, what are you guys doing?
Just grabs the paper out of his hand.
I already figured it out. You guys are dumb. And then he has to be like, Malvin, you maybe remember when you told me to tell you when you were insensitive and loud? It's like, you're doing it right now.
Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah, so they tell them that they'll never get in the front door because you need like some sort of login and password, but they said there's probably a back door in the system. They explained that like, people that build these systems like create a secret password that only they know that they can get back in. So they tell them to research the guy who created the system, and so they figure out it's what's his first name? Falcon's the guy, but I can't remember his name.
I thought
John Falcon. Okay. And the Malvin figures it out because the first game Stephen Falcon. Okay.
Yeah, because he was supposed to be played by Stephen Hawking.
Oh, okay.
But they thought having a guy in a wheelchair Stephen Hawking didn't want to do it because he's not an actor. And it would be kind of weird. And they said having a guy in a wheelchair would be too Dr. Strangelove, so they decided not to go that route.
Could he still talk at that time? Could he still talk at that time?
I would assume so, yeah. I don't know how far along he was. He was probably just wheelchair bound and probably couldn't talk rapidly, but maybe, I don't know. That's a horrible disease he had. So that's one of those things. It's like, oh, you're lucky you're good at math and can just live in that math world, because otherwise life would really suck. I am a prisoner.
But Malvin tells them that they needed to figure out who the first guy is. Look at the first game on the list, and it's called Falcon's Maze. So now they're looking for Falcon. It's a montage of research at library, a lot of old stuff like looking at microfilm and stuff like that, and going through
videos on projectors. That stuff. Yeah.
And computer libraries and other computers.
Isn't it wild? Like if you wanted to do that today, you just sit down at home and you could find all that stuff about that guy conceivably. Yeah. But our biggest problem now is lying. This is so ridiculous.
Which just shows you how many people didn't do that shit. Like when, and still don't do that shit. It's like, well, I could do the research, or I could use my imagination.
Yeah, one's fun. One is less encumbering. The truth is just handcuffs that get put on you.
But the info's coming up that Falcon is dead, so it's like, so they kind of see like, well, I guess this is a dead end. Jennifer jogs over to David's house, to show up. Yeah, she's like I don't know. She's like basically like, I don't even know if it's typical, but like what is remembered of the 80s of like the aerobics era and stuff like that, she basically embodies in this whole movie. So
yeah,
she's jogging, she's doing aerobics later on. She was apparently going to be tasked to be in an aerobicized video. It's like, yeah, let's hire underage women to be in an aerobics video. So yeah, it's very 80s.
Oh yeah, I was watching this.
um
Old truck stops.
What was that? I lost my notes. Okay, yeah. So, oh yeah, yeah. So he's like deep into like research, and then she just pops in his room, and he doesn't have a shirt on, and he's like, "Oh, I'm doing research," and then he realizes like, "Oh, there's a girl in my bedroom. Maybe we should put a shirt on and throw away my dirty underwear."
Yeah.
And so yeah, so he's talking about Falcon. Built like learning computers that will like learn from its mistakes, which now we'd call an AI, but it's a whole different. Machine learning is different from AI because it's kind of like machine learning is basically giving it so many examples that it's like, oh, okay, this is the right thing. So it's like, and then AI is, I don't know, AI is debatable whether it actually exists, because if it does, I guess we're all dead. That's always a fun thing to think about. So
yeah.
But like machine learning is like literally it's like training a child, but like giving it so many examples that it's harder for it to screw up. Somewhere that was an idea about a video game where they had AI, where it's like actually like old, like it's counterintuitive to like how we see like software nowadays. It's like, oh, the newer software is better. Where like here it says like, well, actually the older AIs are better because they've had more time to learn, and so the newer AIs are worse.
They're just angry children. Power of a god.
So I also like that they're talking about like, it's like, when did he die? He was 41. It's like oh, he's pretty old.
Yeah, that's a full life.
He had I don't know how his wife died, but he had a child who also died named Joshua
in a car accident.
Oh, okay.
That's why the character was supposed to be in a wheelchair originally.
Oh, okay.
It was from that car accident, but they just didn't, because like I said, it was like, oh, we're just Dr. Strangelove light.
But he has a video showing like, it shows his son and stuff like that, and that's where he gets the idea. Where it's like, oh, I should put Joshua in as like the password or a login name, and so he does that, and now he's talking to the Whopper computer, who now is like looking for Dr. Stephen Falcon and thinks it's him because he's logged in with this backdoor password of Joshua, which they I'm just calling it the Whopper the rest of the time, but they interchangeably, like, it's like the military guys call it the Whopper, but like Matthew Broderick, they call it Joshua. It's like, because they see it as like a living character and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they even have it talk, so it like makes sense for them, where it's like,
yeah,
the military guys, they're just looking at screens. It's like, can you tell the Big Mac and the Whopper to shut the fuck up?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm reading a book here.
And I have to, what was the Whopper around at this time?
The food, I don't know. I always thought this was like a play on the Whopper's candy.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I guess that'd make more sense.
But it could be. I never really thought of it.
Yeah, I bet Whoppers have been around since like the 1800s, like the malt candy. Yeah, I bet they've been
probably
around forever.
In them back then. Morphine's core. Whopper, it's good for your pain. It's like, I thought it was a candy.
Yeah, so like,
morphine kick.
So they're talking to the Whopper. The Whopper's talking back. So he hooks up a speaker that reads the text in a computerized voice, which is a great voice. Like, I don't think, like, they have to have something that can emulate that now. But that's
John Wood read the dialogue backwards.
Huh.
Not the words backwards, but just read them out of order, kind of like Yoda talk, but it was everything backwards. And then they took those recordings. The same actor that played Dr. Falcon and they spliced them together like in the right order, and then they put like a little digitizer on it, kind of an effects like a phaser effects from a guitar or something, and that
Yeah.
was actually that guy's voice.
Okay.
That's why, because some of the words are kind of jumbled, they almost cool sounding in a way,
yeah.
because that's what they did. Because if you do that, I guess anyone can do that. Like even on GarageBand, you could just like switch their order back around, and if you throw a little enhancement on it, like yeah, you can do something similar to that. I mean, you won't have an English accent, of course, but yeah. But he didn't really have a detectable accent. But once you know that, then you start listening
Oh yeah,
to it.
I mean, yeah, it definitely sounds
Oh,
like
okay.
that guy, but yeah, there's no accent in the voice of the computer. Would you like to play a game?
Yeah.
So they start playing Global Thermonuclear War. They play the game as the Russians because I guess they thought it'd be cool.
Yeah.
Which they don't bring that up because they try to like say like, oh, we think he's working the Russians, and like nobody said like he picked the Russians in the simulator or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like what he's doing their planning too. And his plan is to like hack into the computer and fake a Russian attack, which will force them to launch their entire arsenal of retaliation. Like, it doesn't seem like a well-conceived like KGB master plot, unless like suicide is the goal. Or
All right, we're gonna have a next week. No, 2 weeks from now, we're gonna have an active shooter drill in our school.
oh god,
But they're not gonna do it like they're
playing the shooter.
somebody. They're doing it for real. They're gonna have somebody come in and do blanks and like shoot up the school.
Sounds like a terrible idea. This could go wrong.
Which we did that at our reserve unit, and so that was like, but that was almost kind of fun.
Yeah. Better hope everyone knows, because
Oh
like,
yeah,
you're gonna have some hero go out to their car and like, I'll stop him.
well, you see, that's so yeah. The unit that was kind of a surprise, but eventually, like, oh wait, we know it's a because I think like the thing with like we always forgot to do is like you basically just run away because like at a base you're not armed unless you just like brought guns with you.
Yeah.
Or you work in the armory because that's where everything is. But we'd always like forget to call 911 during the drill because like, well, we know it's not real. So but here like they're gonna have like cops and they're gonna be like they're gonna block off all the entrances so everybody has to come in somewhere in the one entrance, and then everybody's gonna be checked on the way in, and then they're gonna perform the drill at some point. So like everybody knows this like ahead of time, which just makes me think like, well, is this an opportunity for somebody to just actually shoot up the
Hey, there's some. Well, no, I'm not going to talk about that on YouTube. Never mind. There's some weird coincidences like that before in these things.
But anyways, that's beside the point. But I'm just like, the thing about a drill is you're not supposed to know about it beforehand, which then gives people prep time, which then lets people be awful with their imagination. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't think I'm going to go to school that day. So, because they're like, because I have like a box cutter on my tool bag, and like these cops are gonna have to like go through my tool bag, and the teacher's like, yeah, just don't bring your tool bag that day. It's like, well, then why not just let's not go to class.
Bring myself.
I can go to work and just make money. It's like I'll just do that. So we cut to NORAD, and they're getting missile warnings. The place is going crazy. This is where it says William H. Macy's in here somewhere, but I never found him. They go to DEFCON 3. At home, David's getting in trouble because the dog knocked over the garbage. Because like he didn't put it like a weight on it or stuff like that. I mean, that used to be a thing. They used to have like garbage cans that were like, I don't know, like medium height. They're all made out of metal, and you'd have to put like a brick on it to keep animals out of it. And so that's not so much of a thing anymore. Although, raccoons will still get in your stuff, but everybody has like those like big totes nowadays that the city just gives out, right?
Yeah, that's what I have. Yeah, okay. We finally got those.
Oh, New York's like, that's a whole weird thing too. You ever yeah, you ever see like a New York City like garbage strike?
Oh yeah, I remember one when I was in the 80s when we lived outside of New York City. where
and
there's just
just
like piled up in the streets like
yeah.
mountains. The whole
But
city smells like a landfill.
well, and the stuff where it's like you have newspapers bundled up and like that's supposed to be taken separately. And it's like, Jesus, how many newspapers are in this fucking place?
Well, then you have some buildings that have incinerators in them. You just throw it
Yeah.
down the chute, and there's a giant fire in the basement of your building. This sounds fun.
So because he gets in trouble, he has to shut off the computer, and then all the warnings immediately go away at NORAD. So
Yeah.
that's, it's like, oh, the game he's running with a computer is like being portrayed as real within the war room. So, but then like one of the computer guys is like running in saying like, it's a simulation, stop. But you think they'd have more guys, so than just one guy running to the room. I mean, all these guys are computers, aren't these? All these guys with, I don't know. That's a weird thing with the Air Force, where they seem to have like too much money for what they do.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do you do? So if there's a war happens, like, what do you do? It's like, well, we bomb stuff. It's like, oh, so you're on the ground with the troops. It's like, no. But obviously
we bring a lot. We can, for man to man, we're the most destructive part of the U.S. military, if you include nuclear weapons. Pound for pound, the Navy is like in there too. But yeah, they can. There is a scary part of because they say like, because I don't think the Air Force has special forces.
They do, but that's like a
perimeter defense guys. They're frightening. They're like, yeah, we'll just kill you if you come near this thing. We don't know who you are. We'll just shoot you.
The Air Force big thing is they have like a I forget what they're called. They're really like paramedics, but paratrooping paramedics.
Oh, okay.
And they got to be able to like, they're like the guys you'd send in to get like to like rescue a pilot, and those guys have to have like they have to go through severe training to do that stuff.
Oh yeah, it's the guy who used to host Forged in Fire. He was a Air Force pararescue.
Yeah,
but he could like fight his way through a jungle if he had to.
Yeah, that stuff's crazy. Like, you got to carry a body and run for 40 miles in a day. So yeah, they're able to trace that there was a computer being used in Seattle, Washington that set up the scenario. David sees that there's like a computer malfunction like on the news, like that with like, there was a nuclear response, and I was like, we don't know what happened. So he immediately thinks it's him. Because that's what the movie needs to do.
Yeah.
I think a kid at this age probably like, huh, that's weird, and just like not think the two like intertwine.
Paradox and similarity,
So yeah, David gets worried that he's in trouble. But Jennifer seems pretty cool about it. It's like, hey, I think we're on the news.
Don't talk on the phone.
So David gathers all his printouts, and he's going to throw them all away. Then the Whopper starts calling up David looking for Professor Falcon, and that's where things. It's almost like a horror movie. It's like, stop talking to me. Ring, ring, ring. I think it's where he asks like something. It says something like the primary goal, and David's like, "What is the primary goal?" And the computer's like, "To win the game." And then this is where you get like basically like the time limit, where it's like essentially like the game's going to end in 52 hours regardless of interaction or no interaction. So at the end of the game, it's just going to launch all its nukes or whatever. So that's our time. That's our ticking time clock. Then we cut to David leaving a 7-Eleven. And here's just obviously being tailed by an FBI agent, and then just like more and more blatant, where there's just like 4 guys walking behind him, like 4 cars are pulling up.
Yeah,
nobody
attempting to.
Yeah, well, also it's fun. It's fun because nobody announces themselves, so it's just weird.
Can we pause for a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that.
Sorry.
I think I'm having taco retaliation. Anyway, so they arrest David.
Yeah. Then they cut to they're at NORAD and there's a tour group going through for some reason.
Yeah.
Like not like, oh, we're letting the government officials through or like the senators. Like, no, it's just like somebody from some school that's letting through.
Yeah.
I mean, this allows David to escape later on, so it's fine. David's brought in for questioning. They bring him to because they're in Colorado, right? That's where NORAD is.
Yeah, NORAD's in Colorado. So they bring him to Seattle to Colorado.
Very quickly. And
Yeah.
seemingly not by plane, seemingly like just like car ride, which would be like, I don't know, like how far that'd be like a 9-hour car ride or something, or even more.
You think so? Because I don't think NORAD's like near a major city. It kind of defeats the purpose.
What's this? Oh yeah. I have some weird gum stuff between his assistant Pat and where he like quits chewing the gum and just puts it in her hand, and then she puts it in her mouth afterwards and starts chewing it. Like it was a funny scene, but I know what I'm saying. What am it? Oh, that's right. So we have the FBI agent. One of them is James Tolkien. That's the actor. He plays Nigan, and you know him from as the principal in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Which weirdly, I think these movies, I forget when Back to the Future came out, they weren't far apart, but like weirdly, this movie kind of seems like Back to the Future in a weird way. I don't know. Like in some of its aesthetics, but like they're absolutely different movies, but some of the aesthetics too, where it's like, you know, they're just high schoolers trying to figure things out in the world. It's also stuff where it's like the same way, like the way Ali Sheedy's dressed in the beginning of the movie is kind of the way that Elizabeth Shue's dressed in Back to the Future. Or it's not Elizabeth, she's in the sequels, but whoever his girlfriend is in the first movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, yeah, it's just probably 80s look.
Yeah.
And it's the same cinematographer that worked with Spielberg. And
oh, okay, yeah.
So that could be, I don't know how much they do wardrobe, but maybe they're like, I want this to look a certain way.
The FBI thinks he's like some Soviet spy because they don't believe he could have done this himself. Which is just always a great conclusion.
Yeah.
They couldn't do this by themselves. It has to be more
Everything's
complicated.
Occam's razor leading towards working with the Soviets.
McKittrick tells David, or he takes him around the place, and has like there's a fun little bit where he like stops to look at a computer bank and then like runs to catch up, and he's like has this kind of pause like, wait, what the hell were you doing? It's like, oh, never mind. And being that he's like right now being like associated as like a spy, you might not be like wandering off during the tour.
Let's give him a grand tour of our like secret base. You know?
But here McKittrick does like a good job of expressing like how dire the situation is. Like, do you realize you nearly started a war? So, and then here's where David says that like tells McKittrick that Joshua called him, which I don't think he understands like what that means. But McKittrick disbelieves it anyways because he's just like, computers don't call people. So, but then McKittrick gets a phone call and then he leaves David in his office, and we have Bergeron's like increasing things to DEFCON 3. Meanwhile, David is talking to Whopper on McKittrick's computer. Here, David gets a clue like of a classified address in Oregon. And then like as he's like looking at it, the FBI drag him away because they're like, hey, wait, there's some weird stuff going on. Like he's on a computer, like he must be doing it. Because I think I can't remember. They might be getting like fake signals again. We're like, it's a launch or something. I forget.
That's when they see the bombers interdicting Alaska.
Oh, okay.
And then they send interceptors up, and then their interceptors disappear, and they're like, they're talking to him on the radio, like, "Did you get shot down? What happened?" There's nothing here.
Yeah, so he's trying to explain to him that the computer doesn't know the difference between real life and the simulated war that's simulating right now. So yeah, so that's where basically the Whopper's gonna launch the nukes when the game ends because that's how it ends the game. They lock David in like a medical room. Here he does some like neat little drawer hack magic where it's like, okay, some doors are open, but some doors are locked. But if you just take out one of the drawers above a locked drawer, then you can just get into the locked drawer. Which is fun logic that I've done stuff like that before.
Yeah.
Um, and he's able to get like a tape recorder, and some like alligator clips, and he's able to like hack into the door, which has a keypad number on it, and he knocks on the door to get like the guard to come over to open with a keypad, and this really records the keypad not being played. And then he's trying to tell him like, hey, I need to explain things, but the guy just pushes him off, and so he closes the door, and then the guard goes back to hitting on the secretary, like talking to like, hey, can you teach me about your backswing?
Yeah.
So I don't know what sexual reference he was really meaning about. And then David rolls back the tape, plays him putting in the keypad, and then it just opens for him. Which is a cool thing. Like at some point you could actually do that. I don't think you can do that anymore, but at some point,
No,
because it's all digital. So, I mean, I guess you could record a digital signal as long as you'd be able to put it in somehow. But David sneaks away with a tour that was that's still going through. I think DEF CON. I think things get increased to DEF CON 2, and like so they're kicking the people out of there. There is some guy who goes like, hey, what are you doing? And like then I don't know. I always thought David was like going towards like to sneak in with a tour group anyways, but here it seems like he was just sneaking around, and then one of the guys just accidentally gives him the best cover he could get. So I don't know.
because he's like hiding in grates and under the floorboards. And
yeah,
it comes out like behind the tour group about 10 feet, and the guy's like, stay with the group.
Yeah,
That's what the rules are. This isn't we're not screwing around here or something. It's like, oh, sorry, yeah, great, the tour group, gotcha.
But then he's not with the tour group anymore. She's just like with some like random trucker, and he gets dropped off at a phone booth, and here he hacks it with like a pull tab. Did they switch are they still all pull tabs at this time, or
No, that would have been, even at this time, they would have been the regular kind.
Oh, okay. So he just found an old pull tab.
Yeah, there was probably one around. I think like weird things like V8 juice that came in the tiny cans still use those. So you might find one, but yeah, the like Pepsi and Coke were the main. They were using the flip things.
Well, I forget. At some point, I think they're literally drinking tab, and I couldn't remember if they actually had pull tabs on tab or not. Tab is such an 80 thing. I forget. Like, it gave people cancer somehow, or I can't remember how that worked.
Yeah, whatever kind of sweetener they used in it, that artificial sweetener. Give you
I thought it was the cans. I thought it was the sweetener. I don't know.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
Because remember, they came out with NutraSweet in the 80s to move away from the other stuff, because they said this is better, and they're just watching the liability clock kick that around. It's like, how introduce this new stuff, and then when everyone gets cancer, it's like, it can't be our sweetener. I think it was some kind of saccharin based sweetener that was giving everyone cancer.
So he goes to the phone booth with like this pull tab. He takes like the bottom receiver off, and he's able to like hold the pull tab and kind of create like a short circuit somehow that makes the phone believe that it got 25 cents or whatever. So
yeah.
Then he puts all the phone back together, and he calls up. He's looking for Robert Hume, which that's like the alias for Falcon now, because he's not dead. He's alive. They just he says later on that because he knew too much, they basically like fake killed him off to like have him have like some normal existence. Although I don't that's always a thing in movies. I don't, it's like, I mean, there's witness protection, but like I feel like there's no reason to actually ever do that. But I don't know.
Yeah, why would they do that with this guy? Would they I mean, if they thought he was going to betray state secrets, they'd say he was crazy and lock him in a mental institution, or he'd have another car wreck.
Yeah.
You know, or he'd be put in a maximum security holding facility in New York City and then hang himself. What, you never know. But yeah, for some reason they probably he went mad and they like, okay, let's have a gentle retirement for him.
But he can't find Falcon, but he's still suspicious about it. So he calls up Jennifer and he convinces her to buy him a plane ticket to Oregon. Which, I mean, that's always the thing where I've only known plane tickets as being as astronomical expenses. So I don't know, like, it's like, oh, it's $30 for a plane ride. I have no idea, but my whole life, plane rides have always been crazily expensive.
Yeah, so. It's like $500. That's to go to Florida or something. Like, we're not even talking, overseas. So yeah, but I have no idea.
Yeah. I always like I like the one somebody created a app where you could basically you could get like a super cheap ticket. Where it's like it would be like you'd have to buy a round trip ticket, but it's like one of these round trips that are like used so often that they're very cheap, but then like you always have like a layoff somewhere, and it's like actually like what the app is doing is like when you get to your like in between layoff destination, that's your actual destination, and then you get off the plane and just go home.
Yeah,
and then the next
airport security and all that love that.
Oh yeah, they absolutely hate that. Yeah, they tried to sue this guy. I mean, maybe they did successfully sue him eventually, but like they tried to sue him a bunch of times because it was a way to get like, exploit their pricing system, but also they just have like, here's a full plane, here's a half empty plane. What the hell just happened?
Yeah. Did these people leave their luggage on the plane? What's going on?
Yeah. That's the thing. The thing you had to do is like no check luggage. Like it wouldn't work otherwise.
Yeah, it's just like you're using a plane like a bus. Like
yeah. Just walking on flip flops and sunglasses. Where are you going? Home.
Yes, that's another thing that would never happen nowadays in this movie. Can you, another person, buy me a plane ticket and I'll just go pick it up and go somewhere else? It's like, not in this world, maybe back then. You start doing that stuff now, it's like you're gonna have a different kind of federal agents waiting for you. What's going on? I mean, I knew guys around here who were born in America but had names that were similar to people in the Middle East that they were watching at. They couldn't get on a plane for years because no one would believe, like, this is my birth certificate. I was born in Dearborn, Michigan. They're like, well, your name's, Hassan something or another. And like, this guy's on the list. And it's like, that guy's from Egypt. Dearborn. It's like, nope, can't help you. They finally got it taken care of. But it's like you had to hire lawyers and talk to the government and prove who you were. And it's like, wow. But that was, post 9/11 hijinks. So.
Yeah. So David gets, goes to the airport to get on the plane. He gets the plane flight to Oregon, but then Jennifer just like hops over, like bikes over or drives. I don't know what the hell over. She's like, it's just a 3-hour drive. Anyways, she's back in the movie.
Yeah, she's back.
And so they hop a ferry. Literally, they hop it as it's like, leaving the docks.
They use their superpowers to jump on the ramp.
Yeah. And the few action scenes of this movie.
Well, there's an action scene in it later, but it's a great one, but it was an accident and they just kept it.
Was that the Jeep rolling and stuff like that?
Yeah, I listened to the John Badham director's commentary a couple years ago because I have the DVD of this, and it was like, yeah, that wasn't. But he's a British guy, but he's like, that wasn't supposed to happen, but it looked cool, so we created a scene where they were getting out of it.
They find Falcon, played by John Wood. He's flying a remote control pterodactyl.
Yeah,
which is very weird at first. It's because it's a good looking pterodactyl, but it's like, wait, what movie is this?
Yeah, what's going on? It's Journey to the Center of the Earth.
But he doesn't want anything to do with him. David mentions Joshua, and so that kind of like piques his interest. And they cut to like night, and they're in his house. Oh yeah, in between, this is where this is where Behringer declares DEFCON 2 because there's like fake Soviet responses.
Yeah.
They also mention here that if they go to DEFCON 1, that allows the Whopper to launch the nukes by itself, but that's still later on that's kind of redacted where there's a button, but also the computer is like overriding things too, so it's like a lot of things, like all their fail safes are being broken. So
Colossus is taking over.
This is also where like the U.S. planes go to intersect, and they're like, yeah, no, nothing's here, dude. So yeah, then we come back to the cabin with Falcon, and David and Jennifer are disappointed with him because he has no interest in helping them, even though they explain exactly what's going on and he can probably help them. And it's like, nah, you just gotta let things happen, you know. It's just the way things happen. You can't
It's
control
like
anything.
he built his house on an island right near a primary target, so he would die early. And he's showing him movies of like the dinosaurs because that's his new thing is dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So he's like a kid. He's like a 12-year-old again.
Well, it's also about like the inevitability of death and how you can't like change it in any way or something like that because his wife and child died.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now he's just a broken and ambivalent man. And so Dave and Jennifer try to leave the island, but there's no boats. And then Jennifer's like starts to like undress to like swim across. And then he's like, wait, I can't swim. And so they kind of have like this heart to heart and like kiss a little bit where he's like saying like, there's all these things I should have done. Like I never learned to swim, and now we're all gonna die because I wanted to play a video game. Yeah, it's a fairly sweet moment, I guess, for young actors. But it doesn't work completely, but it's fine for this movie.
Well, one of the things I read
shoehorn in somewhere, but
is a lot of the dialogue in this because there was a different director to this movie initially.
Oh, okay.
And he wanted to do a dark thriller. And the studio was like, no, this is all kind of sci-fi weird anyway. Because 7 studios passed on this before United Artists. Like, the people didn't want it. And so they had a different director, and I forget what his name is. Let me look. And he wanted to shoot like a dark thriller, like a Cold War, an actual Cold War thriller with like Martin Brest was the editor.
Oh,
was the original director. And some of the scenes he filmed were actually in the movie still. Like the one where he's talking to the computer guys at Microsoft headquarters or wherever, and there's a couple others. Those were very scripted. A lot of the stuff when they came in was Barry Corbin. All his dialogue is General Behringer. It's 100%. It's like, this is generally what we're going for. Say what you think this person would say, because he's based off a real Air Force general that the writers met that ran NORAD. He's kind of an off-the-cuff crazy guy. He was smart, but he was kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to shoot from the hip and say whatever I want to. And so most of his dialogue was improvised, like pissing on the spark plug. And when the one guy, McKittrick, called Behringer a pig-eyed sack of shit, and Behringer was like, oh, I expected better out of an educated man like yourself. A lot of that interplay was just completely improvised. They tried a few different things, and so a lot of the dialogue between him and her was kind of general guidelines. But yeah, let's see what works. Because there was a lot of natural reactions and weird humor in this movie if you pay attention, like off the cuff moments and stuff.
Yeah.
And you can tell it's like, yeah, it seems pretty fun. Like when Ali Sheedy blocks him off with her legs as he's walking past the desk, totally improvised. So I kind of had a weird reaction, like, what are you doing? It's like normally there'd be a line in there or something, but no, he's just like, because that's how people actually act. So, yeah, so a lot of the stuff, I think that scene was pretty much like, okay, the world's going to end and you're upset, and she wants to swim across, and then that's why. So some of it seems a little awkward, but it's like, oh, that was by design.
Yeah, okay. Well, especially seems
they all
true
had
for teenagers.
These were all great actors, so it's like, yeah, you can just riff with it a little bit.
Then a helicopter shows up and chases them down for no reason.
Yeah.
Again, another false action scene.
Yeah, they're running slowly away from this like attacks chopper with a giant searchlight. It's like, where are you going to go? You're on an island. You're going to jump into the freezing cold waters of the Puget Sound or whatever. Die from
Uh,
hypothermia.
but it's just Falcon, and like he's had a change of heart. And so
Yeah, he
this,
called the Air Force, and they're like, "Yeah, let's send a chopper out right away." The guy that went crazy because his kid died, and yeah, we had to give him a new name and everything. Yeah, he's on the line. But it also shows how desperate they're getting
yeah,
because they do want to believe that it's a simulation. It's like because none of this stuff makes sense. Like politically, there's no. Why would the Russians do this? Well, so they all want to. They're all willing to like, what are we going to do here? But they also have to act like, oh, we might be attacked, and we can't like, screw around and not respond. So that's the danger.
so I have that being the end of Act 2. So we have Act 3. NORAD gets a signal of a Russian launch, and so they go to DEFCON 1. Falcon and the kids race to NORAD before it closes. And here's where we have like the Jeep scene where it just like crashes into a fence or something. And this is where they turn it into an action moment where like they get out and have to beat the closing door.
Yeah. Because they were just supposed to drive through the fence, but I forget, and I'm going to misquote it. And there is a director's commentary, but like they make the fence material out of something different, lighter than actual steel and corrugated steel, because that could really hurt someone. Like it could break apart sharply and impale someone if you just try to drive through it. So it actually like wrapped around the Jeep, and the stunt driver couldn't control it because the fence was now wrapped under the tires. So it just kind of rolled on its side, and they're like, well, no one got hurt, and that looks cool. So then they cut from that, and then you see like Falcon and everyone getting out of the Jeep. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. You're supposed to drive through the Jeep, and they were supposed to go through the tunnel at NORAD, which is actually a famous tunnel in Observatory Park in California. Like that's where they shot. They had exteriors of NORAD, but when they're running through the tunnels, like NORAD's not going to let you do that. They shot it in that tunnel, which like 50 movies have had things shot in that tunnel.
Oh yeah, so yeah, in Stargate, that's the tunnel. Well, no, the outside NORAD is where Stargate is.
Yeah.
In the Stargate universe.
Yeah, they never show it here. Kind of disappointed. I was
that's
like,
in a separate room.
Okay. They have the amazing control room. It's because all the stolen alien technology.
Falcon and McKittrick meet. Falcon's like happy to see McKittrick, but like it's not the other way around.
No. McKittrick is the imperfect apostle of Falcon, who doesn't really like, he has the smarts, but he doesn't really like, he can't put it on paper like Falcon could.
Yeah.
That's why they have an imperfect Whopper / Joshua. Like, you're not teaching it right. John, you picked a hell of a time to show up.
Falcon tries to convince Behringer that everything on the screen is a simulation. So Behringer is talking to the president and trying to say like, hey, it's a simulation, don't retaliate.
Yeah.
And so here's they call the first base that's going to be hit on the list, because like now they just see like there's like thousands of nukes on the screen. It's represented like in digitally. Which there's a game that basically did this perfectly, just called DEFCON.
Yeah, I have it on my computer. It's kind of silly because everything's equally balanced. It's like the ultimate game theory game, where it's like, yeah, both sides have the same weaknesses and strengths, and it's like, but you have to commit to this nuclear war. And it's like, well, yeah, you just destroy each other, because you're not like, oh, can I like use my submarines to hit Moscow, because they can't detect those submarine launch missiles because they don't go outside the atmosphere and wipe out their command and control. No, you can't do that. It has to be in order. And it's like, well, this isn't really how it goes. But okay.
Yeah, it ends up being less of a game, just more of a cool visualizer.
yeah. It's like, oh, I know the underlying strategy here. I want to see if it works, but that's not the lesson you're supposed to learn.
So yeah, they set up the nukes. Right, this is where they set up a button. It's like, okay, if they need to, they'll launch the nukes. But so they see the impacts graphics on the screen. It's it's like it goes very bright and everything, and very cool graphics.
And it's the one, I mean, of many, like, we have to make this up, glaring errors is they call impact. It's like, no, they don't, because they don't impact the ground. They explode above the target, so they would say detonation. I think the code is new det.
Huh.
and everyone shits their pants because you start losing satellites rapidly when that happens. You're not going to be able to graphically see this across the country because your satellites are going to be getting knocked out from the electromagnetic pulse effect in the upper atmosphere. But it's a movie.
um, but even so, there, the simulation says like, oh, we've just been hit by nukes, but then the bases are reporting in and everyone's alive. There is a weird like delay or that there shouldn't be, but it's there for dramatic effect rather than just like.
Yeah, because they're talking to Elmendorf Air Force Base, which is like on the west coast somewhere, like I forget, but it's yeah, that's another thing. If you want to correlate, do something cool. If you like reading charts and stuff like that, which I do, it's like look at all the bases, just freeze frame the image, look at all the bases listed on here, and then look at the Base Closure Act of 1994, and you'll see like almost all these bases are gone now. They don't exist anymore. But it's kind of if you're into Cold War trivia, that's fun. But yeah.
So the floor is celebrating. It's like, hey, there's no nuclear war, thank God. But here's where the Whopper switches things around and it deletes all the access codes to the system, so no one can now change it. She can change the system until not to launch nukes, and so
yeah,
now
it's like a
trouble.
countdown running. It's cramming billions of codes to get this 12-digit launch code to launch all the missiles in the U.S. arsenal. Which okay, wow, just one code.
And here they represent it as like, oh, it's found one code, like which
it's a countdown timer.
Yeah,
differently projected.
Yeah. And they, also they say they can't unplug it because then that'll just automatically launch shit.
Yeah, again, back to launch on warning. Which, here's some more Cold War trivia. Even though we probably didn't do this, I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming we didn't. The Russians did. They created a system called Perimeter that still functions. And it was basically a series of seismographs and radiological detectors set up around Moscow and other strategic points. And if it detected nuclear detonations and radiation through seismographs and radiometry equipment, there were people in salt mines and deep silos on either side of Russia, and they would launch a missile that would transmit the codes. They have 2 missiles flying back across Russia, and that would launch all the remaining nuclear weapons in the Soviet Union. Now they were doing this, and this was Soviet like 80s tech, so it was good. None of the colonels, because see, here we have generals in charge of our rocket forces. In the Soviet Union, I don't know if it's still the same, but they had like 2 generals and a bunch of colonels. And they didn't have like the Air Force was responsible for X, or the Navy. They just had what they called strategic rocket forces. And so it was a weird command structure. Like even within the Navy and the Russian Navy and the Russian Air Force, it was a intertwined structure, basically because they didn't trust each other. And none of the colonels would hook this system up. They would always say, yeah, we hooked it up, we tested it, it was great. Just like your safety test at Chernobyl, it worked out swimmingly. So, but supposedly they've kept this system and have modernized it and still have, but it could just be a feint too. It could be like something they say.
Yeah.
Because before we end the movie, I'll get into the ugly truth that I found about nuclear war. Like I said, in Nathan's Youth of Apocalypse and going to the library and asking for weird books and like, you can't check that out. That's a reference book. It's like, yeah, I just sit here and read it. It's like, it was like theories of World War III and just different stuff. The reason the Russians had almost double the amount of nuclear weapons that we did, and the reason they bankrupted themselves to spend all this money on the most like interlaced air defense network in the world, they had to put radar up in this massive country, was because they knew nuclear war was technically winnable by the U.S. Because if we used our submarines and destroyed their command points, which they were a lot more limited than ours, they effectively couldn't retaliate. So they had to have like twice the number of weapons, twice the number of protective systems, just to be able to, if we attack them secretly. They always thought we would secretly attack them. That's why they hated the Pershing missiles. They hated the Griffin missiles. They didn't like our Trident. I mean, back then, I think they were called the Poseidon the submarine launch missiles, but they couldn't detect any of those. And they like the Pershings could be in Moscow in 12 minutes because they don't go outside the atmosphere. So the stuff they show you in the movies is always the silo launch stuff. It has to go way up and has to go into a boost phase and then hover above, and then they could rain warheads down. Well, our submarine missiles can do that too, but they never leave the atmosphere. You can't detect them, and they're fast. They're like moving 17 times the speed of sound. So the Russians always had to have double systems because they knew if we wanted to sneak one in on them, they're fucked. They couldn't. And their systems were terrible anyway. They were always behind us. They still are. And but that's like the way to win a nuclear war is to be a sneaky bastard and to have a clear technical superiority, which they knew, we knew, but we always like portrayed it to the public as we would never do this. It's unthinkable because we're killing more people in one day than have died in the history of warfare. So we don't want to be those guys. Let's put our back to the wall, or something. So yeah, that's why the Soviet Union went bankrupt, because they were so paranoid. That's like, we know they're going to sneak one in on us, because if we had that ability against them, we would use it. That's always that circular thinking of, but how they portray it in movies or whatever, it's like both sides are fairly evenly matched and they would just annihilate each other. And it's like, yeah, true, but it would be the equivalent of like two modern armies marching in a line in like Civil War formation, firing at each other. It's like, you wouldn't do it that way. You would do it a lot more subtly and brutally, or it'd be a lot easier to destabilize a government too than to lose 30 or 60 million of your own citizens, because like that's a big reset. We lost like 4,000 people on 9/11. It's like, oh, the country will never be the same. What happens when you lose 20 million? It's like, oh, is that like the Stalin thing where it just becomes a number at that point? It's not even real. It's like, well, it's real to the people that died. But yeah. So anyway, this is one of those, because I always wondered, it's like, why do they make these movies and it's like nobody wins? It's like, why would you spend all this money in a game you couldn't win? Just cut it down to 500 weapons on each side. It'd be a lot cheaper, and you're never going to use them anyway. But the thing is you could win. It's just, what price are you willing to pay to win? That's the objective. And no one was willing to pay that price, and it wasn't worth it. But it could be done if you're dark enough. An Edward Teller guy. It's like, yeah, we can do this. That's the guy who invented the hydrogen bomb, by the way. Well, him and Orem, but yeah. But they always try to make it seem like, no, you've got to be rational. Anyway, back to the movie.
Well, we have Falcon trying to communicate with the computer with Whopper, which here he's calling it Joshua. So it's like, which he compares to his son, and basically like basically the computer can't believe in the unwinnable scenario, so he has to teach it that there's an unwinnable scenario. But then David thinks that he can get to Whopper by playing games, so that they make them like print out the games list, but for some reason tic-tac-toe is not on the list. And here they explain that it's like, yeah, you couldn't play it when you were a kid because there's basically, it always ends up in a tie, and so they start like playing tic-tac-toe with the computer, and it's always a tie for like a couple of games. And then like David's like, can we have it play itself? And so they enter number of players 0, and then the computer just runs through, millions of scenarios of tic-tac-toe. And then it starts to, it gets the launch code and starts launching the missiles. And now it's like, the computers have like an electrical failure, but like the screens come back on. And now the computer is rapidly running a bunch of nuclear scenarios, which it should have been anyways. I don't know why this is new information for it, but anyways.
Well, it's applying the information it learned from tic-tac-toe.
Yeah.
To 10,000 megaton exchange scenario. By the way, don't exist, but okay.
And then basically like the machine learns that there is a no-win scenario, or learns what a no-win scenario is. And so it says, greetings, Professor Falcon, and like the only winning move is not to play the game. And it says, how about a nice game of chess? And then so everybody celebrates. Behringer gives the order to go back to DEFCON 5. The camera pulls out, and that's the end of WarGames. It's a happy ending.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a pretty short movie. It's like an hour and a half, but it's
always, it's not long. It's pretty. Like, oh, it's over.
But it's always it's a neat little movie, a lot of little famous stuff from this movie, and the and the movie that gave the form to the modern war room. So
Yes. And this movie is one of the best paced movies I've ever seen, because it does have highs and lows, but it always moves. It's never like, oh, we're too long on this scene. It's like, no, this does what it needs to, on to the next thing. Does what it needs to, on to the next thing.
And considering how much like dire, like, you know, how much of a thriller it comes off as for having literally nothing happen almost.
Yes, no action.
It's all like, you know, a computer game.
Yeah.
That they're telling you it's like this isn't really happening. It's just like genius for what it does. So
oh yeah. And it's resonated through pop culture. It's if you've read the book Ready Player One, there's a whole scenario where you have to replay parts of this movie.
Yeah, you have to like recite the movie like exact. You have to play Matthew Broderick's character exactly, which doesn't seem fun. It's like, here, mimic this, which is why they change it in the movie of Ready Player One. Although
I've never seen the movie, I read the book, but
I mean, like the only thing I can compliment about the book is like if you're writing a book for a young person and you make the hero a young person, like that's always a good idea. But there's so many insufferable things in that book. And Steven Spielberg does the movie, and like the movie I'd say is better than the book, but it's still just like a cloying like nostalgia fest for like all the IP rights they could get they could get, but it's like they couldn't get everything from the book, and so they changed that scenario to it becomes The Shining in the movie, and they kind of like recreate The Shining in Ready Player One in kind of a fun way, but also like because it's Stanley Kubrick, everyone's gonna be like, this is sacrilegious, and it's like, well, it's Spielberg, so you know, whatever, you know, he knew the guy.
What did you think was going to happen?
So I suggest if you see anything from Ready Player One, I'd go seek out the Shining sequence as just a interesting little thing. But you know, the movie's like it's fine, but it's still like it's as insufferable as the book. So, and also it's the funny thing because like they have like, you know, they have this one like one of the hackers where it's like, you know, because they meet each other in this virtual world, and like, you know, they set up their advertisers to like look beautiful or whatever, how they ever want to look. And so, you know, when they meet in real life, she's like, you know, this girl has like a little red scar on her face, and like, I thought I was ugly, and, you know, it's like one of the most beautiful people in the world.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck off, movie.
Yeah, that's the weird standard of beauty. That's why I appreciate British television. Because it's like, oh, these are normal people, like on TV. I mean, they're a little thinner than normal people are, but other than that, it's like, yeah, this guy kind of looks weird, but he was like the best guy at the Royal Shakespeare Acting Company or whatever, so he gets the job. Where here, everyone has to look like an eternal Tom Cruise or or something, and yeah, so that's yeah, but that's WarGames.
Yeah, catch it. It's it didn't. If you go to Just Watch, it didn't say it was on Prime, and I might have bought it, so that's why I was able to watch it without paying for it. So, because we've done,
you have to have it. You have to subscribe to AMC. Apparently, AMC owns the rights to that. But if you get AMC as a $2.99 add-on through Prime or something,
well, I think
doing advertising for Amazon.
I think we've done when we did our '80s feature. I think I bought WarGames back then.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think that's why I was able to watch it on Prime. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, but this movie manages to be, like I said, it's different from all the other. It's not anti-nuclear war propaganda. I mean, it is, but it's not like hitting you.
Well, I mean, really, it's a technophobia kind of movie. The movie is about like, here's all this cool technology, but nobody's really putting fail safes on, or nobody's really putting the proper controls on it.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's somewhat true, but also, you know, we use technology in real life. You're not supposed to be afraid of it, but it can just fuck you in weird ways sometimes.
Usually the way technology is going to fuck us right now, everyone's thinks there's going to be this like apocalyptic AI singularity. It's like, no, it's just guys like me aren't going to have a job anymore. That's how technology is going to fuck us, which will actually have more cascading ripple effects than some, sudden doom scenario that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like we're not going full Skynet with this stuff. It's like, yeah, hook it up to our nuclear weapons. It's like, yeah, okay, sure. It's like these things can't even. I can't even consistently have an iPhone that's not hacked by the Russians every 6 months. So I don't think we're going to hook this thing up to nuclear weapons anytime soon. But yeah, the effects it'll have is it'll cost a lot of normal people their job. That's like when I think doom computer scenarios. That's what I think about. I don't think about like it's that's not exciting. It's it's just a bunch of scumbags that lose their job. Who wants to, there's no movie you could make around that, but it's like, yeah, but it'll have really bad effects. It's like when half the country just goes to straight up crime as an income stream. Yeah. You ain't policing that. Not enough cops, and they're going to be involved too. So. Yeah. So that's your doom computer scenario, not Skynet or whatever this was.
Whopper.
I like how Whopper makes an appearance in one of the Call of Duty games. When you're in Russia, they have it like in a storeroom.
Oh, okay.
That's just fun. It's Call of Duty nonsense.
And I think there's, I think it's in Naked Gun 2.5. They have their version of Whopper or something like that.
Oh yeah. All right, computer. But it just like comes up with pornographic results for everything or something weird like that.
Have you heard the rumor that they're gonna reboot Naked Gun?
Wow. No.
Okay. Guess who is in talks to play the Frank Drebin character?
Russell Crowe.
Liam Neeson.
I don't imagine. I mean, he's a very talented actor. I don't know what his comedy chops are.
I mean, the whole.
He wouldn't need any because he could just be the street guy.
Yeah, because I mean, it could work in some ways, but it's such a weird choice. Where some people, it's like, why don't you just give that to John Hamm? He seems like a serious actor that wants to do comedies.
Gerard Butler. I'm a Los Angeles cop. What? Well, cop.
I mean, really, it seemed like that'd be something they give to Steve Carell, but being that he's already had like 3 comedic failures of rebooted franchises, I think they stopped doing that.
Well, what was the thing about Tom Cruise is going to be the new Iron Man? Is that true?
I haven't heard that. That's new to me.
It's stuff I hear randomly. I don't research this stuff.
Okay.
Again, I have the ability right here to do it, but I'm like, I hear it on a podcast or something. It's like, oh, that'd be ridiculous, but okay.
Yeah, I heard the Liam Neeson one on a podcast. So for all I know, it was like an Onion news article that got misinterpreted as reality, and now it's out in the ether.
Is the guy really not going to be on The Witcher anymore? Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that is true. See, I thought that was a joke at first, and I was like, I wonder why.
Yeah, because that guy is so into The Witcher that it's like, well, apparently there was creative differences, which I've heard. What people didn't like about season 2 is I was fine with season 2, but I guess people that have read more of the lore are like, no, it's like it's abandoning the lore.
Okay.
So yeah.
I was just entertained. Again, that's my standard. It's like,
but also he seemed to be out as Superman. Now he's back in. I'm not sure if those intertwine somehow or if they're like coincidence. Like, well, the Witcher was my way out of Superman, but now the Witcher's betraying me, so now it's back to Superman.
Yeah, the last thing I saw from him on his Facebook or whatever he was on was he's like building a new computer.
Yeah.
To play video games, and it's like, well, this guy seems pretty happy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, money talks, and it's like, okay. Say you want to do Superman for $100 million and work 12 weeks every 2 years? Is like, yes, yes, I do. I mean, that's only common sense.
So if you like what you heard, and how couldn't you, you can find us at anchor.fm/Verhoeven Effect, or you can go to verhoeveneffect.com, or I can't even remember the funny, it was like Angry Bob's films for normalguyreview.com.
Oh yeah, that website.
Oh no. I think I always forget to put the review part. Yeah, so Angry Bob's Films for Normal Guys Review.com will take you there. You can rate our podcast whatever you want on your platform of your choice. Remember, the only rating they listen to is the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't control you. We also have listener support at verhoeveneffect.com, where you can support us on a monthly stipend of either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. And, you know, if you contribute to us, we'll just do more faster, because that's where quality lies.
Yes. That is the quality. That is the quality triad. In the middle of that triangle is money plus time plus speed equal quality. Right?
You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect, Facebook at Verhoeven Effect, and you can find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory, where you can watch both this and that show live and unedited. And you can get t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.